Greetings all, Ferrariman601 here. Welcome to the live commentary stream for Free Practice 2 of the 2017 Spanish Grand Prix. Formula 1 has returned to Europe for the first time in 2017, and we've had one morning session already, and we are standing by for the green lights to go on at the end of the pit lane in Barcelona to signal the beginning of Free Practice 2. Terrestrial television coverage here in the United States not quite underway yet, and we're just waiting for the session to go green here, about 10 seconds away from that. Green light is on at the end of the pit lane according to F1 live timing, and it looks like Kevin Magnussen is the first car out on track in Free Practice 2. Free Practice 1 was a bit of an academic affair for all involved. However, the main storyline from FP1 is that Mercedes appear to be very, very fast indeed. Lewis Hamilton and Valtteri Bottas respectively leading out Free Practice 1. Mercedes bringing out a rather heavily updated car, particularly in its aero specification for the start of the European season, which is traditionally a place wherein teams will bring some major updates to the car. Quite often in previous years, we've seen the teams bring B-spec cars to Spain, considering it is the first European race, and many teams, particularly the midfield or the backmarkers, truly consider the start of the championship to be in Europe here for that first European round 5 of the 2017 World Championship. US terrestrial TV coverage has just started to catch up to the live timing here on F1 app, over on the mobile app there, if you've got that. So we're just getting my first images now of the cars circulating out there on track. The other main storyline from FP1 has to be Fernando Alonso and McLaren have lost another engine. The Honda power unit in the back of the McLaren blew up on Alonso's outlap. Yes, you've heard me correctly. The Honda did not even manage to complete a single lap, let alone a single lap at racing speeds. The Honda V6 blew up on the outlap, and nobody knows why. That seems to be status quo this year for McLaren. The woes continue. Fernando Alonso probably won't be feeling all that bad about it, however. He has, of course, had his first tests at Indianapolis over in the IndyCar, and supposedly everybody at Andretti said that he did extremely well in that test, and I was able to watch a lot of that test, and everything did look very good to me, except for the fact that he accidentally did take out a couple of birds on the back straight there at Indianapolis. Not much you can do about it. The internet meme troops have gone all crazy about that, but Alonso liking his experience at Indianapolis so far, and it also has been told that Alonso will be keeping the car with which he races the Indy 500 a little bit later in the month, so that's a bit of a consolation prize for what has been most definitely an extremely disappointing 2017 in Formula 1 for the Spaniard. Of course, for his home Grand Prix, Fernando Alonso would really desire to be doing a whole lot better. He would love to be challenging for points at very least, if not fighting for the victory, as we saw him achieve here in 2006 and 2013. However, that's what we've got for Fernando Alonso this year. Kevin Magnussen radio to the Haas pits. He believes something to be wrong to the car, but the Haas engineers have gotten back to him saying that everything looks fine. Another shakeup for this weekend and for the remainder of the season. We have had some revisions to the dress regulations regarding how the drivers' names and numbers are put on the cars. You'll notice on all of the cars now we have much larger nameplates for the drivers, either the driver's full name or the three-letter abbreviation that you see on F1 TV graphics for the driver's name. You'll also see on some teams flags. The drivers' national flags are on the cars now, as well as a much larger version of the driver's number. Ferrari have gone very retro with those numbers. They look like the old numbering schemes that they used to run on their cars in the mid-70s, so definitely a very nice difference there on the Ferrari at very least. I don't understand why Formula 1 has decided that we need to have larger numbers on the car. However, that's what they've done. I think Formula One in general has the idea that at some point the fans are kind of dumb, which I do take as a bit of an insult, and I'm sure all of you do as well, and that we can't tell the cars apart on track. Anybody who's ever watched Formula One for longer than 5 minutes understands how to tell the cars and drivers apart. You look at the helmet colors, you look for the number if the drivers have a very similar helmet design, but for the most part you can identify a driver just based on the helmet alone. So you don't need a big number on the car, you don't need the driver's national flag, you don't need their name, you just know who you're looking at. But so are the rules. In replay, US TV showing a replay of what happened to Fernando Alonso in FP1, the McLaren spinning out in turn 2 and then being craned away. There was a tremendous amount of fluid coming out of the back of that McLaren as it was being lifted by that crane. It looked to be about the same color as engine oil. I'm not sure if it was engine oil or if it perhaps could have been coolant from the radiators. It had a bit of a goldish tint to it, though, so it could have been engine oil unless they put some sort of dye in the coolant water in the radiators to be able to tell it apart from other fluids. But that was the situation for Fernando Alonso. He certainly was not happy about it, and I've never seen that amount of fluid pouring out the back of a Formula One car before. McLaren, you've got some big problems here, and you've not made any progress since the last time you were in Spain in winter testing. There's a big problem with that, boys. Get it fixed. Sid Motorsport, yes, it would be quite ironic if Alonso were hampered with engine problems in the Indy 500. Of course, IndyCar runs Honda engines in addition to running engines by Chevrolet. However, Alonso will be running a Honda engine due to McLaren's big-time sponsorship of this Andretti Autosport outfit. Hopefully he doesn't have an issue. I do believe that the Honda engines, by and large, in IndyCar have been very reliable, and there was a time when Honda was, I believe, the only engine supplier in IndyCar. Therefore, they do have a lot of experience building engines for Indianapolis and for the IndyCar series in general. However, we will see. 500 miles is a long time. The Indy 500 is an incredibly stressful race, particularly on the car, because provided you have ideal conditions, you can run at full throttle the entire time. So that is a lot of stress and strain to be put on a car and to be put on an engine, so failures are always possible. However, remembering last year's race, I don't recall too many engine failures, to be honest. I don't recall any engine failures, actually, of a very dramatic type, where you see smoke and flames and sparks and whatnot flying out the back of the car, although some engines may have gone sour in the pit lane, and it just didn't look that dramatic. But we'll see what happens to Fernando Alonso. I believe he has a very good chance here of being competitive at Indianapolis, despite him never having raced on an oval before. I do think he will be a very quick study, and so far his testing times, and at Indianapolis they tend to measure an average speed rather than lap time, and so far his speeds have been down from the front runners, but he's only driven the car once. So I do think that once we start to get down to carb day and things like that, you're going to see Fernando Alonso really coming on the pace, and then as he starts to learn more about the car setup and how to make it do what he wants and how to keep it from doing things he doesn't want, you're going to see him really come to the fore, and I do think he is going to be somebody to reckon with at Indianapolis. Kevin Magnussen to the Haas pits again. He says that it feels like something is broken on the car. However, Haas still cannot find anything wrong. Magnussen wondering whether or not it may just be the strong winds around the circuit unsettling the back end. Despite that, our current running order as it stands at the moment: Sebastian Vettel in P1 now with his best lap time, a 124.655. P2 for Sergio Perez, 124.7 dead. Hulkenberg, P3, 125.383. P4 for Romain Grosjean, 125.514. P5, Esteban Ocon in the Force India, 125.543. P6 for Julian Palmer, and he's now currently been bumped down to P7 because Felipe Massa has just moved up to P3 at 124.908. Palmer's lap time of 126.273. Daniel Kvyat in 9th, 128.438. And Kimi Räikkönen in P10, the last car to post a lap time at the moment, 134.519. Obviously an outlap there for Kimi Räikkönen. Carlos Sainz now on the leaderboard as well in P11, 134.734. Yeah, Sid, it's not uncommon to see engine issues for Honda or anybody else in IndyCar. I mean, it's still racing, it's still mechanical components running at very high speed in very close proximity to each other, so failures can and do happen. But yes, you're right, I don't recall any problems in Phoenix either. Also, yes, Andretti are very quick, and of course they did win the Indy 500 last year with Alexander Rossi, so if there is anybody with which to make your IndyCar debut and your Indy 500 debut, Andretti is definitely a very safe pick with whom to do that. Kimi Räikkönen now jumping up to the top of the timesheets, 123.143. Yet to post a lap at this time are Lance Stroll, Stoffel Van Dorn, Lewis Hamilton, Daniel Ricciardo, Marcus Ericsson, Fernando Alonso, Valtteri Bottas, and Pascal Wehrlein. Last year's Spanish Grand Prix winner Max Verstappen now into P2 with a 124.346. He is down by over a second at the moment from Kimi Räikkönen's best lap time with a 123.143. Sebastian Vettel now jumps up to P2 with a 124.003. Right now, Kimi Räikkönen, the fastest guy on track by about 1 second, even over his teammate. You do have to wonder if Ferrari are running different programs on each car. I would reckon to say that's probably the case. What will be very interesting to do this weekend is, because the teams did all of their winter testing here in January and February, it'll be very interesting to compare the ultimate lap times achieved here to the ones that they were able to achieve by the end of winter testing. We all know that everybody sandbags in testing and that we didn't see the ultimate pace of the cars by the end of that second winter test from Catalunya. However, also, we have now had 4 Grand Prix worth of experience running these 2017 Formula One cars. Therefore, some development, of course, has been done. We've seen a lot of developments brought onto the cars for this weekend in Spain. So, at the end of the qualifying session, have a look at the lap times and then have a look at what they were at the end of winter testing and see how much of a gain the teams have made, because it's almost certain that pretty much every team, except for McLaren most likely, have made gains in lap time as well as top speed. So have a look at the speed trap numbers and have a look at the lap time numbers and compare them to what they were in winter testing at Catalunya. Of course, it's not exactly a one-to-one comparison because it's a little bit warmer now in Spain than it was in February. However, it is a close enough comparison, being the same track, of course, so it will be very interesting to have a look between those comparative times between winter testing and the qualifying session for this weekend's Spanish Grand Prix. Yes, Games Donovan. Honda going to partner up with Sauber. I laughed so hard when I saw that storyline because we all know how terrible Honda have been since they came back into Formula One in 2015, and they've not made any progress since 2015. They've had now 3 years. They're in their third year of this program, and they have not made any considerable headway whatsoever. Now they're expanding to supplying a second team. I know Sauber are in some financial trouble, and perhaps they were able to get those Honda engines for a very steep discount, considering they are the slowest, first of all, and the least reliable engines on the grid. So perhaps they got it for a good deal, but they're not going to get any performance out of it. So I think you're exactly right. Honda will do no good for Sauber. However, Sauber will probably do some good for Honda because they'll now have 2 more cars with which to test their new developments if they ever come out with them. And they'll have twice the experience out on track every weekend than they do right now, supplying 4 cars rather than just 2. That is provided that they supply identical specifications to McLaren and to Sauber. We don't know if that's going to be the case. We don't know about the details of McLaren's agreement with Honda in terms of whether Honda were to supply any other teams. Do they get identical specifications, or do they treat McLaren almost like a pseudo-factory outfit? I don't know. However, it does also give a little bit more fuel to that rumor mill of McLaren perhaps having signed some sort of a deal with Mercedes, either for 2018 or for some sort of exploratory technical partnership marrying Honda and Mercedes. Mercedes taking Honda under their wing and saying, no, this is how an engine works. Suck, squeeze, bang, blow. You guys don't know how that works, apparently. Who knows what the details in any sort of hypothetical marriage with Mercedes and McLaren or Mercedes and Honda would look like, but that Sauber deal did strike me as there could be something else going on behind the scenes there between McLaren and Honda that they don't want us to know about right now. Eric Bouillet, of course, says that everything is sweetness and light and it's just wonderful. Fernando Alonso continues to make wisecracks in the press conferences about wanting to battle with Sebastian Vettel for the lead of the race, but then he just loses everything on the straights. The Hondas are so slow in a straight line, it's absolutely pathetic. They've been as much as 30 kilometers per hour slower on the long straights, particularly in China, I remember. They were woefully slow, and of course that is indicative of the power deficit. Yes, Sid Motorsport, I do agree with you. This does show the financial problems that Sauber are having. In terms of how they have those reliability issues in Formula One, though, compared to what they're able to do in IndyCar and WEC, yeah, it is a little bit of a difficult one to get your head around, I do understand. The problem is, though, Formula One is such a technically sophisticated sport, and yes, WEC is as well, and WEC probably the closest analog that we have to Formula One nowadays, with most of the LMP1 cars anyway running some form of a hybrid powertrain. We all know what Porsche are doing with that V4 engine, the 4-cylinder longitudinally mounted engine there, with the electric motors, the MGU-K system on the front axle, which puts out about 400 horsepower by itself. But similarly to a Formula One drivetrain, that Porsche drivetrain also uses turbocharging with an MGU-H system, and then that harvests off of the turbocharger, just like in Formula One. The MGU-K harvests off the front axle and then deploys onto the front axle as well, so it effectively creates a four-wheel drive car for the times whenever the MGU-K is being deployed. I think, though, the difference between Formula One and IndyCar for Honda is that Honda just have had so much more testing time for IndyCar. And also, when we think about it, yes, most IndyCar races are longer than a Formula One Grand Prix, and a lot of them are on ovals, and that's a whole lot more stressful for an engine, but the demands for an IndyCar engine are a bit less, I would say, than for a Formula One engine. A Formula One engine is designed to be used, and nowadays this is a little bit less true because they've got these ridiculous restrictions on how many engines you could use in a year, but a Formula One engine is basically designed to be shut off for almost its entire life, warmed up, fired up, and then run basically at full power and full RPM for an hour and a half straight, and then thrown out at the end. Now, yes, they do have to last for as many as 4 Grand Prix weekends nowadays, but reliability was never in the idea for a Formula One engine design, going all the way back to the start. Ferdinand Porsche saying the best engine in the world is something that, crosses the line in first and then falls apart. Yes, that's essentially true. In IndyCar, though, with the restrictions on development, with the homologation, everybody gets the same engine specification. Because of that, I think Honda wanted to be sure that they were going to be reliable. And, testing is effectively unrestricted for IndyCar. There's nothing stopping Honda from going out and renting out a racetrack and just putting a car out all day long and testing different things. No teams need to be involved with this. Honda could do this on their own. With Formula One, the testing restrictions, you've only got 2 weeks in February to get everything ready for the start of the year, and then you rely on your computer simulations. I think that's what's caught Honda out, and they didn't want to try and poach engineers from other companies. They didn't want to try and look at other teams or other engine suppliers' data. They wanted to figure all this out on their own, and I think they really underestimated the real scope of this, probably because they have that IndyCar experience and saying, well, yeah, it's still a V6 engine, it's still turbocharged, the F1 engine's running a hybrid powertrain, but how hard could it be? I think they really underestimated that real scope of the extent to which all of this development needs to happen and how mature it all has to be right at the beginning. Yes, Gabe Zonovan, I agree with you there. Honda probably are paying Sauber because I can't think of any reason why Sauber would want to take these Honda engines. Like I said, they are the worst engines on the grid by far, and if you're chasing results, you're never going to get them. We've had some changes up on the timesheets in the interim here. Valtteri Bottas now at the top of the timesheets with a 123.064. Of course, the most recent Grand Prix winner is Valtteri Bottas. In P2, Kimi Räikkönen of Ferrari 123.143. He is only 81 thousandths behind Bottas' best time at the moment. P3 for Lewis Hamilton, 123.619. P4, Sebastian Vettel, 124.003. Vettel still unable to break into the 123s at the moment. P5 for Max Verstappen, 124.346 in the heavily updated Red Bull, it must be said. P6 for Felipe Massa, 124.522. P7, Carlos Sainz, 124.614. P8, Daniel Ricciardo, 124.681. P9, Sergio Perez, 124.7 dead. And P10 for Stoffel Van Dorn, 124.797. Interesting to see at least one McLaren up there in the top 10. Speaking of the other McLaren, Fernando Alonso has not yet turned a wheel in this session. I don't know the true extent of the failure, if there actually was a failure in FP1 for Fernando Alonso. Like I said, when the crane picked the car up to recover it back to the pits after Alonso spun off in a big shower of tire smoke, there were gallons of fluid falling out of the back of that McLaren. It was almost as if somebody did not put some sort of sump plug in either the gearbox or in the oil tank for the engine, because it was just a deluge of fluid falling out the back of that car. So I don't know if there was actually a failure that occurred on that McLaren or a mechanic made a mistake, but regardless, we are not seeing Fernando Alonso out on track at the moment. What do we think Checo should do next season? I'll leave that open to anybody who is watching at the moment. Checo, of course, is Sergio Perez. He is currently driving for Force India and currently classified P9 in our session here. Personally, I think he is actually quite a handy driver. He says that we shouldn't remember him for his McLaren days, and I tend to agree with his assessment there. I don't think McLaren ever gave him a fair chance, to be perfectly honest. There were two drivers who really got shortchanged by McLaren in recent years. Heikki Kovalainen and Perez. Kovalainen, I don't think they gave him nearly enough time to get up to speed with that car. 2008, he managed to win the Hungarian Grand Prix, and then 2009, when McLaren really did not have a very competitive package for most of the season, they managed to claw it back at the end and win a couple races, but Kovalainen, in many ways, in my opinion, he became the scapegoat for McLaren's problems back then, and then they let him go at the end of 2009, which I personally think it was very unfair. Perez, I think he sort of fell victim to a similar sort of thing. McLaren started to lose their form in 2012, and then particularly when Lewis Hamilton left the team, they were just nowhere, and they've been nowhere ever since. And Perez was caught in the middle of all of that, and unfortunately, I think he's had his reputation sullied quite a bit, simply because his team forgot how to race in Formula One and had nothing to do with their drivers. I think there is a chance that he could get that Ferrari seat. There is really nobody being named right now, at least concretely in connection to any Ferrari vacancies that occur. The silly season has kind of started a little bit early this year. The rumor mill says that Sebastian Vettel has an option to join Mercedes for next year. I don't know how true that is, considering Sebastian Vettel's leading the World Championship in a Ferrari this year. And, of course, you don't want to spoil a good thing if you've got it. However, Kimi Räikkönen's contract is up at the end of the year, and at this point, it's unclear whether or not Ferrari will want to renew it, simply because Räikkönen has had a little bit of trouble getting up to speed so far this year, especially relative to his teammate. However, Ferrari have options open. I think Ferrari always have options open when it comes to drivers. There's even talk that Fernando Alonso might want to make a comeback to Ferrari, as ridiculous as that sounds. It would be the second time that Alonso has returned to an old team. Of course, he later returned to Renault in 2008 after leaving Renault for McLaren in 2007. We'll see what happens with that Ferrari seat. They may well have somebody in their junior ranks with their name sort of penciled into that slot for 2018. I don't know how likely that is, but again, if we really knew what was going on in upper-level Ferrari management, I think we'd have a whole bunch of intrigue lost in Formula One. So I think it's good not knowing what's going on. I agree there. I don't see Seb leaving Ferrari. I don't see any reason why he would want to do that. Like I said, he's leading the championship in a Ferrari in 2017. Ferrari look better than they have really in the last 10 years, let's be honest. So I don't think Sebastian Vettel would be well advised to leave Ferrari at this point. Räikkönen, however, unless he can really pull his performances up and challenge for wins and actually win a couple of races, as much as it pains me to say this, I think Kimi Räikkönen's days in Formula One may well and truly be over. He just doesn't seem like he has the passion or the motivation anymore, and he doesn't really have the speed. Now, I'm saying this as he sits in second position right now in practice, but it is just the practice session. We'll see what happens tomorrow in qualifying. But I do think we'll see a new face at Ferrari in that number 2 seat. Whether or not it's Fernando Alonso, who knows? A potential Alonso-Vettel lineup at Ferrari, that may have some fireworks to it. Because we all know how competitive Alonso and Vettel both are. Alonso wants to win again. Alonso wants to be world champion again. And, of course, Sebastian Vettel would love to be world champion again, particularly with Ferrari. So that would be an interesting dynamic to see. Shades of Mercedes 2016, I think, would permeate that potential driver lineup. Yes, Alonso leaving McLaren, if that were to happen, I agree that would probably be a good thing for McLaren, because they have essentially no sponsors on the car. They have essentially no sponsors on any of their team publications or team merchandise, and Alonso is demanding a very hefty salary. And rightly so. He is honestly one of the best Formula One drivers we've ever seen, but McLaren probably having some big problems paying him that salary right now, so that would be a good thing for McLaren. The only issue for Alonso would be, could he get similar money from another team? How many other teams are really in a position to supply that sort of salary? Ferrari, maybe Williams, and that's about it. So, and Mercedes, of course. Alonso to Mercedes, I don't think it works, because I have a hunch that Mercedes are going to be keeping Bottas, considering he's already won a Grand Prix this year. And, of course, they're going to keep Lewis Hamilton because he's won 2 world championships with them. So if Alonso is to stay in Formula One in 2018, and it's not with McLaren, it basically has to be Ferrari by default. Speaking of Fernando, he is out on track at the moment. He has not officially crossed the line. He went out, did an outlap, and came back into the pit lane and crossed the line in the pit lane. So he's classified as having completed a lap, but not as having put in a lap time. He is back out on track at the moment, and all of the fluids staying well and truly tucked inside the McLaren. So that's a good start for McLaren. Keep the oil in the engine. Good going, guys. The FOM cameras there showing a very interesting detail on the front of the Red Bull, I believe, of Daniel Ricciardo. The mechanics just looking at the lower wishbone, the forward lower wishbone on Daniel Ricciardo's car, and twisting it with their hands. You could see quite a considerable amount of deflection in that forward lower wishbone on Ricciardo's car, right around the point at which it attaches to the front end of the chassis. I've never seen anything like that before, and these suspension components, of course, with their layup in that carbon cloth. For those of you who don't know, these composite components are produced out of carbon fiber, yes, but that carbon fiber is literally cloth that is then laid up layer upon layer, impregnated with resin, and then baked under pressure in an autoclave to create these components, an autoclave being a very large industrial pressure cooker, basically. And the reason why that sort of deflection and flex would be so concerning, particularly just under the comparatively small load of being loaded up and twisted by a mechanic's hand, is that these carbon components, they are extremely strong, but they're only strong in one direction. And the layup of that carbon cloth is what gives them that strength. And when it's stressed in the direction for which it's designed, it's immensely strong. But the moment that it comes under any sort of considerable strain in another direction, these carbon components just shatter. And that's why we see when these cars hit each other or hit the wall, we see the suspension just fly to pieces and the wheels fly off of these cars, because the suspension is not designed to be loaded in any other direction except vertically. So to see that sort of deflection and that flex on the RB13, that is very concerning indeed. If I were Daniel Ricciardo, I don't know how keen I'd be on getting back out on track right now. In terms of how the cars look this year, they look pretty much exactly the way they should look. They most remind me of 2007 and 2008, which was the last time that F1 had these low and wide wings, and that's very good. I think now they look like a logical progression of the 2007-2008 formula, and that is honestly what I liked the best, and I'm very glad we have this back. The only thing I don't like so much about these cars is the low noses, and I know this has been done for reasons of safety, wanting to keep the cars from, in the event of a perpendicular T-bone type accident, keeping the nose from penetrating the side of another car's cockpit and potentially injuring a driver, but I just don't like the low nose. It just doesn't look good. If they had a higher nose similar to what we had in between 2005 and 2008, I would like that a whole lot better. But beggars can't be choosers. I think the cars mostly look good right now. These cars definitely are fast, and we are getting pretty good racing this year as well. In terms of the sounds, I think they're marginally better, but I do agree that we could get some better sounds. I think you could even get better sounds out of a V6, to be honest. There are two things that need to happen. The engines need to be allowed to rev out to that 15,000 RPM rev limit, and that also means either increasing the fuel flow limit, increasing the fuel capacity, or just getting rid of any limitations with fuel whatsoever, and adding a second turbocharger. IndyCar sounds pretty good with a similar V6 engine. It has 1 liter more displacement than these Formula 1 engines, but the IndyCar engines are twin turbo, and that means that there are 2 exhaust outlets. There's 1 exhaust per cylinder bank on that V6 engine, whereas in Formula 1 we have a 2-into-1 exhaust. So you have the exhaust primaries coming out from each bank of cylinders, and then they converge into a single collector pipe through the turbocharger and then out the back. That's why these engines sound muffled. If you were to make these cars twin turbo, they would sound very good indeed. Kimi Raikkonen's lap time now, a 121.112. Sebastian Vettel now in the 121s as well with a 121.220. The 21s continue down to, believe it or not, Julian Palmer in the Renault with a 121.992, and the 122s start in P5 with Felipe Massa. How quick will these cars be going by the end of this session, let alone qualifying? That'll be interesting to see. In terms of the canopy or the halo, at some point it was bound to happen. The typical knee-jerk reaction, though, that we see from Formula One when one bad thing happens to one driver, it's to be expected, really. After Henry Surtees, the studies started to go out in terms of some sort of frontal cockpit protection. They came up with the ridiculous halo device, which nobody liked, and the drivers complained about it not being easy to see around, and quite obviously, you're going to put a big carbon bar in front of the cockpit and then expect them to be okay with it. No. The canopy solution, or the aero screen that Red Bull brought out, that was better, but still was not that great, and it was pretty ugly, to be honest. Now, with this shield concept, I think this is the best compromise. If you want to put some sort of frontal cockpit protection on the car, you need to integrate it into the car's design. And the shield, right now, the early renderings we've seen of it, they just sort of sit on top of the chassis. I think the better solution would be to make the front of the car a little bit more conical, more cone-shaped, similar to how it was in the very late 80s to the early 90s. I'm talking about cars like the McLaren MP44, McLaren MP46, Williams FW14, Jordan 191. Look at the front-end design on those cars, and you see how the entire front section of the chassis is shaped, it's cone-shaped, rather than what we have now with the chassis basically being a square that's just extended longitudinally, and then it comes down to the nose. Better for aero to design the cars this way, but if you make that conical shape, you can have the upper edge of that cone just sort of going up into the cockpit area a little bit. And if you look at the Williams FW14, for example, you see how the driver just sits inside the big flared end of that cone, and you do have that upper cockpit bulkhead really starting to impinge into the airstream, and that does shield him quite a bit. So I do wonder if it would be possible to sort of go back to that sort of design. The halo would not have helped Jules, nor would have the aero screen, nor would have this shield concept. It's harsh, but it's true. He hit the back of a tractor head first. That's going to kill anybody. The only way to help Jules Bianchi would have been to get that tractor off the track. And that is something that F1 has been a whole lot better with since Suzuka 2014, quite thankfully. They have instituted the virtual safety car, which has been effective, and they've also been much more strict about putting out the actual safety car, if not the red flag, when a tractor needs to be put out on track. Yes, of course. That's Formula One design, that's Formula One development. The moment that you give the engineers a new surface to play with, they're going to exploit it for aerodynamic benefit. I think there's a lot to be done for aero benefit when it comes to that shield design. Not so much with the canopy, because they try to have the cockpit be a neutral flow section anyway, just to avoid turbulence going into the air snorkel for the engine. But if you've got that shield concept across the nose of the car, now you have a large perpendicular surface exposed to the airflow, and you can do all kinds of things with that. We'll have to see what the regulations turn out to be. Is it going to be a homologated shield that is standard to every car, or are the teams going to be allowed to come up with their own designs based on regulations surrounding it, as they are with basically everything else in this sport? If the latter is the case, you're definitely going to see some variations in design and some variations in how they treat the airflow around that shield concept. But that all remains to be seen. We've yet to see the shield in real life. We've yet to see the shield put on a car. And I would think by the end of this year we will have had at least one session in which one car runs a shield. Up at the top of the timesheets right now, Mercedes leading the way. Hamilton with a 120.802. P2 for Valtteri Bottas with a 120.892, so 900ths of a second slower than his teammate is Valtteri Bottas. Kimi Räikkönen P3, 121.112. P4, Sebastian Vettel, 121.220. Both of the Renaults in 5th and 6th at the moment. That is a bit surprising. Hülkenberg with a 121.687 and Julian Palmer in P6 with a 121.992. Palmer hasn't crashed yet. Fernando Alonso has not officially posted a lap time. He is classed with a 158.086. However, I do believe that was a time set in the pit lane, recovering to the pit lane, crossing the line in the process. Yes, in terms of visibility with that shield in the rain, or even just with dirt or bugs in dry conditions, I'm sure that the teams will come up with some sort of solution to keep water from accumulating on that shield device too severely, as well as to keep bugs and other dirt and debris from really impeding the driver's vision there. It's Formula One, and these guys can do pretty much anything if you give them enough time and enough money, so I'm honestly not concerned about those visibility problems. I think what could be more of a concern, though, is just simply tricks of light, because you're now having a curved surface presented to the drivers that's translucent, obviously. So what are they going to do with odd lighting conditions? For example, in the night races. Are they going to have issues with reflections and that sort of thing that are going to hamper their visibility? Because there's nothing you're going to be able to do about that. Similarly, bright sunlight coming from behind. Will being lit from behind send basically the full power of the sun straight into the driver's eyes? I don't know. These are all things to be seen, and if this canopy is instituted, we'll have to deal with those problems. But in terms of rain or other debris, I honestly don't think it's going to be that big of an issue. They will find a workaround. I mean, we all know about products like Rain-X that you could put on your windshield that pretty much obviate the need for windscreen wipers in the rain on a road car. So if we could do that for our road cars, I'm pretty sure that a Formula One team can figure out something to deal with the rain on this shield concept. Rather quiet on track right now, just watching Daniel Ricciardo going around here through the end of Sector 1. That Red Bull does look very stable, if not slightly slow. Ricciardo currently classified... Where is Ricciardo on the timesheets? It's not good when you can't find him right away. He's P5, not too bad. Just going through turn 9. He seems to be going a little bit conservatively, but that Red Bull does look stable, if nothing else. He's just turning the wheel once in and out of the corners. No surprises, not a lot of wheel spin in the traction zones. All very cool and calm right now for Daniel Ricciardo. Car's not twitching around very much at all. Through the chicane. And now coming through the final corner. Little bit of a power slide on the exit of the penultimate corner. However, at high speeds, everything quiets down again. It's a 121.585 for Daniel Ricciardo, 0.7 of a second down from Lewis Hamilton in P1 with his 120.802. Looking around the field here for some other storylines, Lance Stroll not having the best time out there at the moment. Felipe Massa, his best lap time of 122.015. Lance Stroll all the way down in P15 relative to his teammate who is currently P8, 123.221. Not too far off of Massa in terms of lap time, however, Stroll well down the field. Just have to wonder what Williams are doing there with their programmed running this afternoon. Max Verstappen bumps his teammate down to P6. Verstappen now occupies P5, 121.438. The 2016 Spanish Grand Prix winner not doing all that badly here. Red Bull at the moment do appear very solidly in that best of the rest spot behind Mercedes and Ferrari. Speaking of Mercedes and Ferrari, we're going to have to see how all of this shakes out in terms of the race results. We definitely see a pattern coming out here. Ferrari, Mercedes in some order like that. However, Mercedes are looking very strong this weekend. Will Mercedes take the first back-to-back victory of the season? We'll see. All these lap times now, with the exception of Daniel Kvyat now being set on the soft tires. Kvyat, the last car classified with a lap time on the mediums, his time 128.438. Some problems there for Toro Rosso as he has only turned 4 laps and his best lap time is a full 7.5 seconds off of P1 at the moment. Fernando Alonso, however, still not classified as having crossed the line officially, still with that 158.086 with only 2 laps posted. Everything maintaining status quo there at the front end of the field. Hamilton and Vettel are in the pits. Bottas and Raikkonen are out on track. Carlos Sainz getting on with the program now in P10, 122.265, out there doing his run on the soft tires. Daniel Kvyat also has improved his time, but he is still running on the mediums. He has now done a 124.802. He is now exactly 4 seconds down on Lewis Hamilton's best time. Kvyat still classified P19 behind Lance Stroll and Pascal Wehrlein. Fernando Alonso has gotten out back on track. We'll see if he actually posts an official time. Alonso now working his third lap on those medium tires. His official time right now, 158.086, however, not officially classified. Sainz is P10 at the moment. Seeing some pictures of Alonso now on track. He is on an outlap. He's going very slowly. Going very slowly, it must be said. And I don't know if my eyes are deceiving me, but I'm seeing something trailing out the back of that McLaren. It almost looked as if there was some sort of fluid coming down in his wheel tracks. I'm not quite seeing that again now. Perhaps it was a trick of the light, but I don't put anything past this McLaren. It is an absolute dog of a car, and it seems to be run by a whole bunch of incompetent children, if I'm honest. Big twitch through the final quarter there for Fernando Alonso as he begins a hot lap now. Alonso with DRS open. What is it in the speed trap? 311.5 is the speed there for Fernando Alonso, 193.6 miles per hour. By comparison, the Red Bulls are over 200 miles per hour there. Alonso through Sector 1, 1.1 seconds down on P1 at this time, just in the first sector. Alonso coming through turn 6 and 7. How's the car look through here? It looks slow, but steady. Through turn 8, the fastest corner on the circuit. Opens the DRS on the curbing there on the exit. That looks pretty nominal, although very slow. Alonso, 4.1 seconds down on P1 in Sector 2. Whew, this does not look good. Coming through the final sector now, through the chicane. Again, the car looks stable but slow. No big twitch now through the final corner, now that everything's fully up to temperature. Alonso over the line. The lap time is a 126.700. That puts Alonso still in P20, 5.8 seconds down on Lewis Hamilton. He is 2 seconds slower, almost exactly, than Daniel Kvyat in P19. Stoffel Van Dorn in the second McLaren up in P13, 122.693. Both of the Mercedes have returned to the track. Hamilton just completed an outlap there with a time of 2:11.092. The order at the front remains unchanged. Hamilton in P1, 120.802. Bottas P2, 120.892. Both of the Mercedes out on track, as I've said. Raikkonen has gone out into the pits, and Vettel now out on track. Both of the Red Bulls are in the pits. Both of the Renaults are out, as are Massa, Sainz, Grosjean, Van Dorn, and Alonso. Fernando Alonso improves his time to a 125.8 dead. He is 0.998 down on Daniel Kvyat in P19. I've got to wonder why Alonso is 3 seconds slower than his teammate at the moment. Are McLaren still shaking that car down, trying to get their mind around the latest slew of failures, or is Fernando on a heavy fuel load here? I don't know if there's really any point in McLaren trying to see what their ultimate pace is, considering they're probably not going to make it out of Q1 anyway, so perhaps just doing some race simulations now for Fernando Alonso. US television showing Adrian Newey in the Red Bull garage just having a look at the front end of the RB13. I wonder if he is investigating that suspension issue that we saw earlier. Ferrari radioing Kimi Raikkonen saying that they may have an engine problem. I certainly hope not. Raikkonen recovers to the pits here. We'll definitely see Ferrari dive all over this car. I certainly hope that we don't have to have an engine change for Kimi Raikkonen because he's not doing too badly right now. Raikkonen doing some burnouts through the pit lane here. And he has actually gone to pit out to do a practice start, so perhaps there are no engine issues there for Raikkonen. Watching the back of that Ferrari here as he revs up for the practice start. I don't see any smoke or anything untoward, and the launch was very good, so perhaps no problems after all for Kimi Raikkonen. Lewis Hamilton definitely out there on a hot lap. He is a bit slower now than he was on his ultimate pace, but to the tune of 3.2 seconds. So Hamilton now running a race simulation, I would say. Heavy tanks here. Looks to be they are testing the durability of those soft tires on heavy fuel. We'll see how Hamilton qualifies, of course, and that will determine which tires are used for the first stint of the Grand Prix. Lewis Hamilton crossing the line with a 1:25.609. That is actually comparable to Fernando Alonso's best lap at the moment at a 1:25.8, so that definitely confirms my suspicions that Alonso running a heavy fuel load at the moment. Alonso has since recovered to the pits, however. On board with Kimi Raikkonen here, just listening to that engine. I don't hear anything untoward there. So perhaps that was a false alarm from Ferrari. Seeing some debris on track outside of turn 8 on the exit. Seeing a replay of a Toro Rosso. Carlos Sainz running very wide over those sleeping policemen on the outside of the circuit. Lots of sparks and plank dust being kicked up here. And yes, some pieces of front wing coming off of that STR. And apparently some of them, at very least, have landed on the racing line out of turn 8. Yes, that is indeed what happened. There is debris on line out in the exit of turn 8, which of course is blind, so anybody coming out of there will be somewhat surprised to see that debris. It is just barely a car's width away from the curbing there, so it is essentially on line. They may have to throw a red flag out there temporarily just to get that cleaned up, because I certainly wouldn't want to arrive upon that at any appreciable speed. That'll cut a tire down very quickly. Camera's following Daniel Kvyat here through the third sector. Toro Rosso does look very planted indeed. Kvyat's lap time, 1:23.236. That is good for P18. Personal best here now for Daniel Kvyat. He eclipses Pascal Wehrlein's time of a 1:23.599. A red flag has now been thrown for the session. I do believe it is to pick up that debris out of turn 8. U.S. terrestrial TV currently in commercial, so I cannot confirm this for sure. Trying to get a sense through live timing in terms of what is happening, but the track has gone red. All the cars now, of course, recovering to the pit lane. And everybody's still in motion out on track, so I do not believe anybody has gone off. It must be for that debris out of turn 8. Very sensible decision if it is for that. Yes, and we now confirm that from the commentary stream here on the F1 app. They are clearing debris from turn 8. Very wise decision. During a red flag in a practice session, the session clock continues to tick. We're now at 26 minutes 30 seconds and counting here. Red flag simply meaning that nobody can go out on track even though the session clock continues to go. From what I could see, there were only about 2, maybe 3 relatively small pieces of debris, so it should be mere moments for Marshall to run out there and pick them up. And indeed it is. Green flag shown once again. FP2 back underway here with 25 minutes 45 seconds remaining. Kevin Magnussen having some problems with the Haas. Haas have brought a new floor to Barcelona as part of an upgrade package. Magnussen says that the car is essentially undrivable with that new floor, so perhaps some of those components not working very well together, even though the theoretical gains from the CFD and wind tunnel simulations are probably there. Magnussen doesn't like it, so we'll probably see Haas return to an older specification for the remainder of this weekend, I would suspect. World feed now in replay showing the marshals going out there and picking up those little pieces of debris just off of the racing line through turn 8. I do believe they are pieces of Toro Rosso front wing, although I did not see explicitly from where on the car they came, but I do know that they came off of Carlos Sainz's car. Whole slew of cars now coming back out on track. Ricciardo, Bottas, Stroll, Ericsson, Hulkenberg, Hamilton, Fairline. Verstappen now, everybody just going out there trying to get the last 24 minutes of running in. Fernando Alonso now returning out on track as well. We'll see if the Spaniard can do anything spectacular here at his home race. Unfortunately, and not his fault, I don't think he'll be able to. Alonso starting a hot lap again, coming down the straight. Do we get trap numbers here? We do not. However, his speed trap there on the previous lap was a 3:11.5. So yes, very slow indeed for that McLaren Honda, as we have now come to expect, rather unfortunately. Alonso being compared to P1 at the moment, he's on the soft tires, and he's on a low fuel run, I would say, because he's actually going very quick. He is 7/10 now down on Lewis Hamilton in P1 through the first sector, so he's doing much better than he had been doing previously on previous runs. We'll see how he comes through the second sector here, going through turn 6 and 7 at the moment. Some twitches going on that McLaren there, but Alonso holding it like an absolute champ. He is an absolutely steely driver, I must say. Coming through the end of sector 2, what is the time? 54.4, 2.1 seconds down on Lewis Hamilton's P1 time. And now coming through the end of Sector 3 for Fernando Alonso, the time is a 1:24.077. That is still only good enough for P20 and last. Van Dorn currently classified P13, 122.693. Alonso down there in P20. Van Dorn and Alonso both setting their best times on the soft tires. World feed here in replay showing Valtteri Bottas having a lockup into turn 4. No big deal. Turn 5, rather. Just getting on the brakes there, the weight transfer comes across the car and he locks up the left front momentarily there a couple of times. However, it does not hamper his exit too much. A little bit of a twitch over the exit curves for Valtteri Bottas, but no big deal, although there is now a little bit of a flat spot in a couple of places on that left front tire on the Mercedes of Bottas. In replay, on board with Kimi Räikkönen trying to pass, I believe, Esteban Ocon. Räikkönen now on the radio to Ferrari saying that he was pushed off the circuit by the Force India. Indeed, he was not. He just had to go a little bit wider over the exit curbing out of turn 5, but still on the circuit very much there, Kimi. Just coming through the last 17 minutes, 20 seconds of FP1 here. All the teams now well and truly running race simulations, just trying to figure out how it's going to be for the first stint of the Grand Prix. Looking into this, it would appear that most of the cars are going to be looking to start the Grand Prix on the soft tires. Lap times currently right now, I believe Hamilton was on an out lap just now. His current time of 1:32. And now he has crossed the line. 1:26.697 for Lewis Hamilton. P2, Valtteri Bottas. Currently his lap time of 1:26.532, so marginally faster than Hamilton is at the moment. However, they are classified by their ultimate pace. Hamilton's still the owner of the fastest time there for the entire session. Räikkönen currently running in the 1:25s. Vettel currently running in the 1:28s. Verstappen and Ricciardo, both of the Red Bulls, running in the 1:27s, literally within half a tenth of each other. The only one not on a race simulation at the moment, I would say, would be Fernando Alonso. He's currently in the pit lane. However, his best lap time of 1:24.077. That does indicate that Alonso is attempting, at very least, to figure out what the qualifying pace is going to be. And if you're talking about Fernando Alonso, that is not good. He is P20 and last. Van Dorn 1:22.693, albeit he is now on a race simulation as well. His last lap time of 1:28.299. I can't figure out why Alonso is so slow, even relative to his teammate here. There is obviously more pace in that McLaren, as his teammate has demonstrated in P13. However, Alonso, I don't know if he is still dealing with problems related to what happened in FP1, but he's not able to pull himself out of P20. "15 minutes to go in FP2 here at Barcelona. World feed showing in replay Max Verstappen going a little bit wide over the exit curbs coming into the chicane, and then he misses the apex slightly of the chicane. Gets a whole armful of oversteer there, but holds it going off track slightly. Glorious four-wheel drift there for Max Verstappen going over the sleeping policeman on the outside of the circuit. Of course, Verstappen took his first and to date only Grand Prix victory here last year. He would love to be able to replicate that feat, although I do not think it is likely this weekend, considering Red Bull are in that best of the rest slot at the moment behind Mercedes and Ferrari in some order. Also in replay, Lance Stroll. What are we about to see here? He's behind 3 other cars, a Haas, a McLaren, a Haas of Alonso, and could not identify, and a Sauber in front of Alonso. In replay here from Alonso's view, just showing the overtaking action going on here. It's almost as if these guys are racing already. Alonso, of course, losing out to all of them. Verstappen certainly enjoying this Red Bull at very least. He is hanging it out over the curbs. He is stringing it out for all it's worth. Great to see him so enthusiastic behind the wheel, as he almost always is, it must be said. If it is to rain, however, on Sunday, and I don't believe it is going to rain, it very seldom rains on the Spanish Grand Prix. However, if it does, who knows what we might be able to see. Verstappen across the line here with a 126.647. That is well down on his personal best of the session of a 121.438. Again, Verstappen running that race simulation, as is pretty much everyone else. Fernando Alonso has returned to the pits yet again. He is not out on track at this time. Watching Nico Hülkenberg out on track through the end of Sector 2. On a race simulation, of course, his sector time of 57.493, 5.1 seconds down on Lewis Hamilton's session best. These comparative times at the moment are essentially irrelevant because they were set on low fuel. Everybody now running race simulations, of course. That Renault looks very stable. Similar to the Toro Rosso, I must say, in terms of its outright pace, and that is a reasonable assessment considering that Carlos Sainz is P10 and Hülkenberg and Palmer are 7th and 8th respectively. Hülkenberg across the line, DRS pops open, 128.178. TV graphics disappeared the moment he crossed the line, so I had to refer to timing and scoring there. Fernando Alonso has returned to the track. I feel like we're mentioning him a lot here. I'm personally just very interested to watch him now for the remainder of the season to see what he does and how he acts. There have been some reports of late that Alonso is effectively running McLaren in terms of agenda setting, politically speaking, for the whole organization. And for a driver to be put in that sort of position is not the best. Alonso's certainly very capable of it. He's a very shrewd-minded guy. However, his job is to drive the cars as well as he can, and he's not really supposed to be in the position of being a leader in the team, particularly when it comes to organizational affairs. However, there it is, and seeing him going between Indy and Formula One here for this next month, it's going to be very interesting to see how he's able to prioritize on both sides of the pond, as it were. However, I do not doubt his ability to do so. Alonso's last lap time, technically, it's been classified as 7 minutes, 3 seconds. Of course, he spent an appreciable amount of time in the pits, but yeah, that is Fernando Alonso's 2017 in a nutshell. 7 minutes to cross the line. That's reminiscent of the Life L190 back in 1990. If anybody remembers what that car was like, it was the worst Formula One car in history, and it's officially classified in pre-qualifying sessions with lap times in the 5 to 6 minute range. On board with Romain Grosjean overtaking Pascal Wehrlein in the Sauber. Williams radio to Lance Stroll. Just giving a little bit of coaching to their driver, asking him to brake a little bit later and focus on corner exit. Stroll replies by saying something about the tire temperatures on the rear. He feels that they're a little bit too high and it's hurting his traction on corner exit. Lance Stroll currently classified P17, his best lap time of 123.221, his last lap time of 141.762, now crossing the line of 131.304. Back end of a radio transmission from McLaren to Stoffel Vandoorne talking about removing the steering wheel and passing it to the right. I don't know if Vandoorne having some sort of mechanical or electrical problems on that McLaren, but that sounded to me like there was going to be a steering wheel change on that MCL 32. I don't know if we'll get a picture of that, but Vandoorne currently in the pits, his last lap time of 133.051. Fernando Alonso, his last lap time of 128.123. He remains P20. On board with Sebastian Vettel through turn 6 and 7. Very tight is that Ferrari. No surprises for Herr Vettel. Running heavy on fuel, of course, 4.5 seconds down from the ultimate pace. However, that Ferrari looks very stable on heavy tanks as it does on light tanks. And that is the hallmark of a good car. Vettel coming through the final corner now. How is it under power? Very good. Slight amount of skating at the back, but I think that was just Vettel having a little bit of fun. 127.879 is the last lap time for Sebastian Vettel. Kimi Räikkönen just wondering about his lap times, and they are comparable to what's going on with the rest of the field. Räikkönen's last lap time at 128.056. By comparison, his teammate, Sebastian Vettel, 127.879. Lewis Hamilton, 127.418. Both of the Mercedes cars have now recovered to the pits. Both of the Ferraris are still out on track at this time. Now ticking through 5 minutes to go here in FP2 from Barcelona, the final session of running for the Friday. Sebastian Vettel having recovered to the pits now. Lewis Hamilton in the pits. Timing and scoring going a little wonky here. Lewis Hamilton has done 27 laps on this set of soft tires. Four minutes, 30 seconds to go. Seems like there were just some practice pit stops there for Mercedes and at very least for Kimi Räikkönen. Hamilton and Bottas now back down onto the medium tires. and now back out on track, both of them. Vettel remains in the pits. Raikkonen remains out on track on the soft tires. Vettel now back out on track. He remains on the soft tires according to timing and scoring. All the cars out on track except for Pascal Wehrlein. I do wonder if we'll see any sort of qualifying simulations here in the final 3 minutes and 30 seconds. Most likely not. However, it does appear that we will have all cars out on track for the end of the session. Wehrlein has now gone out. Grosjean has come in as I speak. The commentator's curse, of course. Perhaps just a quick pit stop for Romain Grosjean. Lewis Hamilton and Valtteri Bottas, their last lap times 151.017 for Hamilton, 154.155 for Bottas. They are on flying laps now, and they will count. In replay here, Valtteri Bottas through turn 6 and 7. Bottas going off big time there into the gravel. That gravel trap is not very deep, so he was able to continue and rejoin the circuit. However, that would not have done his tires nor the under tray of that Mercedes very good. Bottas radioing to Mercedes, asking them to look at the rear wing stability. Bottas saying that the rear of the car feels a little bit weird. I couldn't see anything obvious on the replay there. Romain Grosjean in replay in the Haas having a bit of a four-wheel drift and going off in the chicane at the end of the lap. Seeing live pictures once again, Valtteri Bottas coming through the final corner. If there are any problems on the rear of that car, you'll see it through this final corner, and it looks very stable to me. 2 minutes to go in the session. Bottas on his final flying lap in all likelihood. Yellow flag out. Not sure what for at this time. 1 minute to go. Yellow flag stub down. That might have put the kibosh on any hot laps that were going on at the moment. However, it most likely has not affected everybody, as the yellow flag was only out for about 10 seconds. Valtteri Bottas through turn 8 looked very solid to me. Perhaps he was having some tire warm-up issues there. 20 seconds to go in the session. And the reason for that yellow flag was Sebastian Vettel going off at the final corner. Beg your pardon, it was not the final corner. It was turn 4 where Sebastian Vettel went off. He, however, was able to rejoin. Clock at 0. Checkered flag is out. Hot laps will count. What happened with Sebastian Vettel here? Braking into turn 4. The back end stepped out a little bit. That's an odd place for the rear end to become unstable. Just waiting for the cars to finish circulating at this point, and then we'll go through our final order for FP2. It appears that Carlos Sainz will be the last car to cross the line here. Grosjean across the line. Sainz recovers to the pit lane. All cars have now completed their final laps, and the final order for Free Practice 2 for the 2017 Spanish Grand Prix is as follows. In P1 with a lap of 120.802, Lewis Hamilton. P2 for Valtteri Bottas, 120.892. P3, Kimi Räikkönen in the second Ferrari, 121.112. P4, Sebastian Vettel, 121.220. P5, the Red Bull of Max Verstappen, 121.438. P6, Daniel Ricciardo, 121.585. P7, Nico Hülkenberg for Renault, 121.687. P8, Julian Palmer in the second Renault, 121.992. P9, Felipe Massa for Williams, 122.015. P10, Carlos Sainz, 122.265. P11, Romain Grosjean in the Haas, 122.371. P12 for Esteban Ocon in the second Force India, 122.520. P13, Stoffel Van Dorn in the second McLaren, 122.693. P14, Sergio Perez in the next Force India, 122.722. P15, Kevin Magnussen in the second Haas, 123.007. P16, Marcus Ericsson in the first of the Saubers, 123.082. P17, Lance Stroll in the second Williams, having some trouble this afternoon, 123.221. P18, Daniel Kvyat in the second Toro Rosso, 123.236. P19, Pascal Wehrlein in the Sauber, 123.599. And P20, rounding out the order, Fernando Alonso in the lead McLaren, 124.077. McLaren apparently not able really to get their head around the problems that plagued them in FP1, which stopped Alonso's running for that session. FP2 for the 2017 Spanish Grand Prix is now complete and in the books. We will see if any interesting storylines develop throughout the remainder of this weekend, and particularly through Free Practice 3, and then of course it is all to play for in qualifying tomorrow afternoon. At this point, it does appear that Mercedes do have the better on the rest of the field to the tune of about 0.3 of a second over Ferrari on aggregate. However, we don't know what the ultimate pace is going to be. We've not yet eclipsed the best times from winter testing here at Barcelona, and of course we do know that the teams have been able to make some developments in the 4 months following. So we will see what the ultimate speed of the cars is. However, this is really our only opportunity this season to see just how much the cars have progressed from that winter testing period, considering that this is the only place that hosted winter testing, and this is the only place that also hosts a Grand Prix in addition to winter testing. So we will have a look tomorrow to see what those lap times are in qualifying relative to how they are from winter testing. However, for the moment, that is all the data we have. FP2 complete here from Barcelona. Until next time, thank you all very, very much for watching. Ferrariman601 saying we will see you soon.